Module 3, Shinto Shrines, Tamamushi Shrines and Tachiban Shrine. I, Dr. Rita Pratap, former head of the Department, Drawing and Painting, University of Rajasthan, Jaipur. I am going to speak on the Shinto Shrines, Tamamushi Shrines and Tachiban Shrine of Japan. The religious practice in Japan was named Shinto, Way of Gods, to distinguish it from Buddhism, which had entered Japan in the 6th century. Shinto later on developed its own art, architecture, clergy and forms of ritual. In the precincts of Ise-jingu, monuments of this kind still survive. Here, worship took its purest form in total silence with no ritual. Since the reign of Emperor Temmu, the Ise-jingu is rebuilt every 20 years and 59 times altogether by 1973. It is both ancestral shrine of the imperial family as well as the national shrine. The space is dominated by two compounds named Western Naiko and Eastern Geku and has been first built in the 4th and 5th centuries respectively. In spite of the arrival and dominance of Buddhism, Shinto shrines continued to be built in serene woods and beside quiet shores, and were later incorporated into Buddhist compounds. The Tamamushi shrine is portable and oldest architecture example surviving from Asuka period. The initial step leading towards the earliest Shinto shrines were taken in Yayoi times, when the raised storehouse was adapted into an upper class dwelling. Approximately this became the shaman's house. In the two contending major groups which get recognition in Yamato literature, Izumo and Yamato itself each has preserved a distinctive type of shrine. The Izumo Taishi in the Shimen prefecture condescends permitting and all detail are consciously and ritually preserved in every reconstruction, and Ise Jingu in Mi prefecture. Example is of a view of the Shinto shrine at Ise-mi prefecture and plan of the Shinto complex at Ise. Shinto shrines. The religious practice of the early Japanese was based on profound sense of awe for natural manifestations such as sun, water, rocks, trees, sound and silence. Man's response to these phenomena was to purify him and to identify sacred precincts. Later on, this practice was named Shinto, the way of gods, to distinguish it from Buddhism, which had entered Japan in the 6th century. Shinto later on developed its own art, architecture, clergy and forms of ritual. It is essentially an indigenous religion with neither dogma, scriptures nor form. The earliest sacred precincts were places of particular beauty, demarcated by rudimentary stone boundaries and by simple pre-architectural monuments such as rock piles surmounted by stones, indicating the places where sacred presences were first sensed. In the precincts of Ise-jingi, monuments of this kind still survive. Here, worship took its purest form in total silence with no ritual. Construction of the earliest Shinto shrines seems related to the palace architecture of the tumulus period and is characterized by simplicity of both form and material. In the Isi-Jingu precincts, a raised floor building with a giant thatched gable supported by 9 huge pillars is reached by an outside ladder set at a steep angle. An example of a reconstruction of another ancient site is Izumo Taisha, Shinto shrine dated to 1744 in western Japan facing Korea, suggests a particular sense of mystery and also the intimacy, darkness, and warmth associated with the sacred domain of the spirit of Kami. The worshipper climbs long flight of steps and once inside the hall proceeds beyond the central pillar and turns right to the innermost quadrant before reaching the Scantum Sanctorum. All this is in marked contrast to the four-square centrality of Buddhist architecture, where icon images dominated huge open spaces in stone-paved a ground-level monastic hall. The Isi-Jingu on the eastern coast is both the ancestral shrine of the imperial family and the national shrine. An example is of an inner shrine, Isi sanctuary of the Shinto, sun goddess, founder of the imperial line, Mie Prefecture, Japan. It has been rebuilt every 20 years since the reign of Emperor Temu, who reigned from 672 to 686, 59 times altogether by 1973. The space is dominated by two compounds, the Western Naiku and the Eastern Geku, and is thought to have been first built in the 4th and 5th centuries respectively. They are dedicated to Amaterasu Omikami, heaven illuminating great spirit, the daughter of Izanagi no Mikoto, traditional ancestor of the imperial house, and to Toyo Ukeno Okami, great spirit of food abundance and grandson of Izanagi no Mikoto, provider of 5 grains. The site is among tall evergreens near Isuzu River. Its cool stillness is broken only by the clatter of clean washed pebbles underfoot and is said to have been chosen by Amaterasu herself in an apparition to Princess Yamato early in the 1st century AD. Each compound is divided into an eastern and western sector. When one sector is in use, the other is kept empty, white and still with its ground covering of pebbles. Each compound is rectilinear, enclosed by 4 layered wooden fences. The buildings are aligned along the central north-south axis, beginning with thatched and gabled gates set into the southern fences. The main sanctuary, shodan, or 3 bays wide and 2 bays deep, is poised aloft on a structure of pillars and surrounded by a covered veranda. The approach is by a stairway leading to the central bay. 4 fences of different styles are entered by a torii and a succeeding gate houses. Within the rectangular precinct is only a main hall, shogu, almost dead in the center of the innermost rectangle, and the east and the west treasure houses on either side behind. The fences are close together at the back with a series of small gates. A worshipper says prayer in front of the first gate of the second fence. The sanctity of the interior is fully respected, and the public seems to have no curiosity about its appearances. Priests display offerings in small building on the left. The architecture has total consistency in its monochromatic cypress. Hinoki is used throughout, and miscanthus for the roof thatch. The used shrines each have a Taoist spirit screen opposite the main sacred gate. Some elements such as alignment, the layered enclosure, and the metal decorative accents may be later features incorporated from continental architecture, but distinguishing native characteristics remain. The roof with its forked finials pointing skyward at either end, the heavy ridge course topped by cylindrical tapered billets laid crosswise along the ridge, and the main pillars which are embedded directly in the ground, not set in foundations. The general impression is of abstract design, of planes, angles, circles in simple but dynamic interaction. The natural color and textures of the wood and pebbles are not sullied. The effect is warm. The atmosphere is one of intimacy and awe. In spite of the arrival and dominance of Buddhism, Shinto shrines continued to be built in serene woods and beside quiet shores, and were later often incorporated into Buddhist compounds, representing as they did local manifestations of universal Buddhist values. Shinto silence, its simplicity, and its direct yet undefined interactions between man and nature or spirits are characteristics. Japanese addition to or modification of imported religion, just as same qualities modify imported art. Shinto, the native religion of Japanese, was an animistic cult in which all living things in nature were regarded as spirits and ancestors were worshipped as deities. The Shinto religion was originally opposed to plastic and pictorial images, but in Heian period, under the influence of Buddhism, Shinto deities began to be represented in both painting and sculpture. In the 13th century, Shinto art was enriched with illuminated scrolls relating to miraculous lives of the founders and with Mio Mandara giving a bird's eye view of the shrines, regarded as the very symbol of the deities. One of the subjects most frequently represented was the life of Tenjin, god of heaven. Shinto deities are usually simple figures wearing the dress of imperial court of Japan rather than the Indian or Chinese priestly costume seen on the Buddhist images. Shinto meant the way of God, and its origin goes back into prehistoric times, long before the arrival of Buddhism. The Shinto gods and spirits can be associated with natural objects that inspire a certain reverence, such as an unusually ancient tree, or strange shaped rocks, or with human figures connected to the imperial family who are descendants on earth of the sun goddess. Shinto sculptures, they are almost carved from single block of wood and have pure, simple lines and expressionless faces. Not having all of the complex, simple manifestations that are seen in images of Buddhist pantheon. These figures all resemble court figures and as deities are difficult to identify. One Shinto figure that is more recognizable is that of a Hachiman, the deified figure of the Emperor Ojin who reigned from 201 to 312 AD, who is usually shown bareheaded and looking a little like the Bodhisattva Jizo, but wearing courtly costume instead of priestly robes. Few examples of the type are Shinto deity dated to 9th century, single wood block and at present in the collection of the Honolulu Academy of Arts, USA. This figure depicts deity, most likely Hachiman, wearing robe of priest. Originally, the statue has a coating of gesso, but with time this has worn off to reveal the grain of the cypress wood. Another example is of a Shinto deity in the court costume, dated to 12th-13th century, made up of wood and in the collection of the Honolulu Academy of Art, USA. The otherworldly appearance of this deity is emphasized by the thoughtful expression and the raised hand touching his head. Shinto deity of Muromachi period, dated to 15th-16th century, made up of wood and at present in a private collection. This simply carved deity seen wearing priestly attire and was most likely originally housed in a country shrine. Female Shinto image made up of wood belonging to Heian period, 9th century, Koryuji, Kyoto. Shinto images were found used as shrines or temples and dedicated to deities associated with forests, the fields and the waterfalls. This female image coming from Koryuji in Kyoto shows a simple variation of the hompa pattern on the drapery folds on her arms and is related to the seated Buddha images by her block-like massive character and by her slightly forbidding or at least objective expression. The headdress is interesting from the aesthetic point of view and also because it shows the standard female headdress of the period. The Tamamushi Shrine. This portable shrine is the oldest architectural example surviving from the Asuka period. It is also of great value for the study of architecture of the 6th dynasty's period. Housed in a temple which escaped burning, it was later moved to Horyuji. This earliest Buddhist painting is remarkably preserved, fully developed entity known as Tamamushi Shrine. It consists of a model of a temple intended to house small images. It is a box-shaped pedestal and flared base with 4 legs. The cloud brackets are arranged in a radial manner. The Shaka triad for which it was built has been missing since the 13th century. The inner walls are lined with thin bronze plaques bearing rows of little ripaus Buddhas, the so-called 1,000 Buddhas. The popular name of the shrine, Jade Beetle, was already in use in the medieval times. The sheaths of beetle wings were applied decoratively, perhaps in conjunction with the fine gold strips of floral openwork at all the edges and corners. This common beetle and Yamato mushi is widely collected in the months of July and August for its attractive iridescent green and red stripes which run the length of the sheaths. On the front door panels of this shrine are the figures of the two celestial guardians carrying a long spear and a sword. On the panels of the side doors, 4 slender Bosatsu Bodhisattvas. Though archaic, the style is graceful and elegant. On the back panel of the shrine figures a mountain whose 3 peaks in the form of birds had support 3 pagodas, each sheltering a seated Buddha. This scene represents the eagle-headed mount where the Shakyamuni Buddha dwelt. Recent research has revealed evidence of the use of both oil and lacquer paints. Beefsteak plant Shisho seed oil was mixed with lead oxide Mitsuda. Yellows were applied for skin colors and blue-greens for vegetation. Lacquer was mixed with red pigments for clothes and tigers and block for physical body details. The gaudy lotus petals at the top and foot of the pedestal are crude additions, out of scale and damaging to the appearance of each panel of painting. The front doors bear paintings of a pair of Deva kings on dwarf demons. Each side door has 2 bodhisattvas on twin lotuses. The large back panel has 3 spired stupa, shaped structures with statues visible in their arched niches, ascetics in rocky caves, fabulous birds, flowers, heavenly angels, and a sun and moon. The scene on the front of the pedestal may be a memorial scene. 2 monks flank a relic container and 2 incense burners in vertical alignment. Apsaras descend from above. The back illustrates Mount Sumeru, the Buddhist holy mountain rising from the ocean, protected by a dragon building at its foot and summit birds in the lower corners and a moon, toad and 3-legged sun crows in the upper right and left corners. Small figures occupy appropriate places around the panel. The large temple building at the bottom has a seated image in the central bay and an adoring bodhisattva inside bay. In a rare use of Jataka stories in Japan in the Theravada Hinayana tradition, 2 are included on the sides of the pedestal. From the large number of the so-called birth stories of the Buddha or earlier existences, the 2 chosen are of the pre-existing, the legend of the starving tigress. That is, Buddha sacrificing himself to save the starving tigers and sacrificing himself to hear the second stanza of a poem. The story runs as follows. Hunting in the mountains one day with his two brothers, Prince Mahasattva came upon starving tigress and her 7 cubs. His brothers turned and fled, but Mahasattva was courageous and selfless enough to lay down his life and to be devoured. For this act of sublime charity, the prince became a Buddha in his future life. This legend is often represented in the Central Asia at Tung Huang Caves A254 and A428 and at Lug Min in the course of 5th and 6th centuries. But the artist of the Horyuji shrine ingeniously superimposed the 3 different scenes. The prince doffs his robe on the mountain top, leaps into the valley, and below the starving tigress and her 7 cubs devour his body. The Mahasattva of this scene has the same elegance as the Bodhisattvas on the door panels. The C-shaped cliff seems to be built up with straight and curving ribbons of the several colors. This arrangement harks back to a long-standing tradition of Han art. These are narratives in a landscape setting, as though reproduced from hanging scrolls. Looping arcs of a strange otherworldly geological strata form overhanging cliffs on the left sides. The viewer faces the evolving story, following the key figure from the lower left in a large arc to the top and across the down to the lower right. In the first story, the prince hangs his jacket on the flowering tree. His body and the tree in parallel curves, and the story increases in pace, reaching an abrupt climax as the prince throws himself off the cliff onto the bamboo grove below. Slender stalks of bamboo appear to grow into the panel and break the otherwise exclusive single plane rendering. Bamboo sprouts from the thin layers of the rocky edges. Wisteria hangs across the mouth of the cave, and small lotuses and wispy clouds add a cheerful touch. The other story is not narrative, rather, it is a psychological test. The story goes. As a Brahman ascetic, Buddha encountered Indra in the guise of a demon that quoted half a stanza of a poem but volunteered the second half only if his appetite for human flesh could be satisfied. Making an agreement with Indra, Buddha carved the full stanza on the rock and offered himself. Indra relented, however, and spared him. The demon is seen at the foot of the panel. The Taoist motifs in the Buddhist theme lead one to suggest that the Tamamushi shrine was a memorial. These motifs are chiefly in the works which were memorials or dedications, as they stress long and eternal life and natural relationships designed to put the spirit of the dead in harmony with the universe. One large panel shows what may be a memorial service for the deceased. Possibly, if one had to choose for some member of the royal family who had special respect for Prince Shotoku about the time of the Takya reform. The bronze filigree bands ornamenting the pedestal and architectural members were once laid with the iridescent wings of the Tamamushi beetle, hence its name. Although the same type of beetle is found in Korea, the choice of camphor and cypress wood native to Japan is evidence of Japanese manufacture. Sometime during the late Asuka period, that is circa 650, when many of the statues for the original Wakaku Sadera were being produced. The shrine's hipped and gabled roof is tiled in such a way so as to mark a distinct break between the upper and lower portions, whereas the rebuilt Horyuji temple has roofs tiled in one continuous plane, although the rafters beneath show separation between the sharply pitched upper section and the more gently curving lower section. This method gives the roof an effect of curvature and lightness which is characteristic of Asuka architecture. So, the style of Tamamushi shrine shows a combination of very archaic elements with an advanced sense of expression. This shrine of Japanese cypress wood hinoki is unquestionably of Japanese make. A Nihon Shoki text and a comparison of the shrine with the wooden statues of the four celestial guardians in the Horyuji enables one to date it to mid-7th century. Tachibana Shrine. The household shrine known by the name of its reputed owner, Lady Tachibana, has probably been in the Horyuji since about the time of her death in 733. She was Tachibana no Michiyo, the mother-in-law of Emperor Shomu and mother of Empress Komyo. Painters decorated the awkwardly shaped top-heavy box by drawing, worshipping and adoring figures on four sides of the base and figures on the outside and inside the doors. These are scarcely recognizable today. The box has lost its front doors and the side doors are replacements. The ungainly box was to accommodate on Amida triad. These little gilt bronze images are supported above the western lake by compact globular lotuses, their stems curving up from the lotus pond. Sheshi is on Amida's right and Canon on his left. The latter may be identified by the miniature Buddha in his crown. The Amida has a clinging drapery over a substantial body, finished only on the front and sides, still just short of the full and three-dimensional style. The hair is matted, the eyes are so downcast as to be virtually closed, and the mouths are sickle shaped. The low relief pattern of floating scarves and undulating lotus stems of the adoring figures on the hinged screen create one of the finest lyrical rhythms in early Buddhist art. The projected heads, however, produce a discordant note for the disjointed necks. All face the same angle regardless of the slant of the body, as the figures crane their necks to gaze at the Buddha. Noses fall to follow the rest of the face. The 7 little Buddhas, Keibutsu, above sit under unusual open-work canopies. The large halo of intricate open-work is set against the broad planes and simple surfaces of the screen and triad in a perplexing lack of coordination. The lotus pond below, from which the stems rise, is one flat plaque of water ripples, primarily patterned with slightly curved surfaces learned from the Asuka casting. The neat rhythm is broken in the right corner, where the stencil pattern was turned 90 degrees, redirecting the water flow. These major units make the composition a feet base, a background screen in the form of a tiripitch, and the 3 main images which knit a stand on lotuses trussing from the bronze base. It made the total ensemble in 2 to 2.5 feet high. It is therefore a complete group on a fairly large scale, and most extraordinary of all with its original base and background.